Hey, doing, Murielle?
Hey, I'm fine. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Anytime, anytime. It's good to see you. I think last time we saw each other, we were hanging out in Paris. So,
Yeah,
which is
definitely.
where you're from. So,
Nice city. Although when you were here, there was a lot of trash everywhere. So we were all ashamed.
well, yeah, I didn't realize the extent of it, right? Because I mean, where I was staying, it was in a nicer area, and
Mm,
so, but and I kind of joked that the trash looked very French. It's very organized and neat and very kind of romantic looking. But then the next day, I went for a walk around the city, and I was like, oh, never mind.
yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, so because I think for the audience, that was what was happening at that time.
It was a general strike about retirement age. Um, yeah, it went up. It
Yeah,
was messy,
it
but
was.
it happened.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, it impacted my trip a bit. Like getting to the airport was challenging,
Ah,
and then and in fact, when I was on the tarmac trying to take off to Geneva from
mhm.
Charles de Gaulle, suddenly the pilot's like, you know, yeah, we're going to actually have to taxi for a long time because air traffic control is now on strike as
Yeah.
of right now. And I was like, great, cool,
Yeah,
thank
we
you.
had it the day before yesterday again. Mm.
Oh, again, oh, it's still
Yeah.
going. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, it is what it is. C'est la vie, as they say. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, so I'm a hybrid person. I
Yeah.
was in academia for 15 years, and I suddenly decided to move to be an expert in the regulatory field about AI. So I mainly worked on cognitive neuropsychology, and I tried to bridge what was happening in the transformer world with NLP and the brain, trying to find
Oh.
if efficient tools were helping us understanding what was going on in the brain and vice versa. And then I decided to change radically direction, and that's where I am right now, and I'm really enjoying it. I realize so many things are happening right now. Every day is a new day since ChatGPT. So I just decided to move to the regulation world before ChatGPT arrived, but then everything got accelerated. That's
Hmm.
how it happened.
Yeah, it seems like your path has been a chain of very interesting coincidences. So you got into NLP and neuroscience. I would say seems like very early on. Um,
I started 2018 bridging NLP and neuroscience
mhm.
when I was in Cornell. I've been teaching there, and after I came back to France, and yeah, I had research, working on birth models and training corpora of this kind of large language models, and then jumped off and worked in and then in a new field, ever moving field. It feels really different, but it's so like energy, so much energy happening everywhere. So I'm really happy.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I guess when did you notice that things started changing and picking up speed in the field?
I would say 2019, where
Okay.
you really started having like nice long completion, like whole paragraphs. You could say, "Hi, I'm Mary." You had a whole paragraph of a person introducing, I mean, Mary introducing itself. And
Hmm.
what was strange is that the Mary was an escort girl because of biases in the corpora. So that was like, whoo, wonderful. Your name is Mary and you're an escort girl. And yeah, you could even get like a number to call her and everything. It was the time in which it
Interesting.
was completion, right? It was not question and answering, and there was no fine tuning or no question and answering. So it was just like completion.
Back then, would it randomly complete, or what was it?
Yeah, I mean,
Would
it
it always?
was, yeah, definitely.
But would you get different answers? Like sometimes it would be a different person, not just somebody who's an
Yeah,
expert.
you could get different answers, but still, it was like it was a lot of working on having good corpora at that time in my lab.
Mm-hmm. That's real
Yeah, so
fascinating.
that's definitely your topic. Data is like, especially data quality, is the key for having good models.
Yeah, I was actually talking. I put something on LinkedIn yesterday about a Wall Street Journal article I'd found that they posted yesterday about how companies are now investing in data quality because of AI and so forth, which I thought was really interesting. And my whole quip was, maybe this will be the time that companies finally start taking data quality seriously.
Yeah, this is an
Versus
incentive.
all the other times. Yeah, for sure. But I had some friends push back too, and they said, "Oh, data quality is not important for this kind of stuff." And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what your rationale behind this is, but so
I
it's
really think
interesting.
data quality is important. Yeah, even
Yeah.
for not only for fine tuning, but also for retraining from scratch.
Right.
You definitely get better data anyway, you see, there was this big project that was between France and the United States. Actually, it was really international. There were 1,000 researchers involved. That is called Bloom, where they trained this large language model with 155 billion parameters, and definitely data quality was really important in that adventure, because you could have crawl data and semi-crawl data, so that you could really find and locate a seed on a website and decide, okay, we're going to extract data from here. And that's definitely enhancing data quality. Of course, curated data is always, like, human curated data is paramount,
Right.
but it's a lot of money, it's a big investment, and it takes time. So semi-crawl data also give you better performance.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess we're all curious how that's going to work when you move these models into corporate data and whatever it discovers as a result of crawling it. So I don't know.
Yeah. So you definitely have a big move in the business that is like going to bloom in at the end of summer, because people have been engaging in this kind of move to have fine tuning, memory enhancing with vector database, different solutions in order to leverage corporate data and be able to have an interface that is natural language interface like ChatGPT has. So we'll see what is going to happen. The very first experiences I think of are like, this Allen and Overy, this big law firm that did a partnership with a startup that is called Harvey, that is in California, and they asked to have a ChatGPT, an in-house ChatGPT, in order to have legal data, just have a domain specific. But the problem is that, we saw it even in the news. The number of the cases are made up. There are lots of different details that really need to be addressed, and so that it doesn't make up the name, the number of a circular, of a directive, of a law.
Right. Oh yeah, there was that. There was that lawyer that had used ChatGPT to cite some cases, and I guess they were totally false, and the judge was not pleased with.
I think he's gonna be. It's in New York, and that's definitely. he's pledging that he didn't know that ChatGPT was making up stuff, but still, he's gonna have a correctional. He's gonna have an appointment in order to see how to deal with it. Yeah.
I mean,
And
it does clearly say also that the results may be false.
Just right at the beginning, you have a big banner, boom, right in the face. Anyway.
It's interesting. I mean, I guess from the time you got into, AI or NLP, to now, did you expect things to take off this quickly?
So I was so my research project was really onto syntax and something that is called for NLP people, MWEs, some multi-word expressions that are the kind of situation in a text where actually you have a kind of lexicalization. It becomes like a chunk. Multi-word expression becomes a chunk. So sometimes the grammar doesn't matter that much on that chunk. So what is impressive for somebody like me is to see how good it is at grammar. And that's definitely the challenge, right? Can a statistical approach to language really deal with grammar in such a way that you have a real representation of what grammar is? Is it a representation that is linked to semantics of the words, or it's just like an abstract representation of grammar? So this is an open question. There's an article from a Chinese team that just came out, like maybe I read through 2 days ago, but it might have come out earlier, that is addressing this kind of question. So what is the kind of representation this neural network have of grammar, of concepts, and is it really linked to the world? What is the real unit? While you have this kind of, in BERT models, you have this idea that certain layers have certain functions, like the 6th layer is more into syntax, 3rd and 4th more morphology. In the kind of structure of ChatGPT, you definitely don't have this granularity for the moment. So it's a lot of interesting research questions that are open. So if I have to say in one sentence, my astonishment was that, okay, you can solve part of syntax with statistics.
Interesting.
But still you have things between French and English. For example, we don't have this thing that is called preposition stranding, what you're waiting for, and you put the preposition at the end. And we have it in certain cases in French. So when you use ChatGPT, but the 3.5 versions, like 2 months ago, you were getting this kind of syntactic structures also in French, which was strange so you see the grammar is moving.
Yeah.
As it exists in some particular cases in French, then you get it in French too. But it's just very restricted as a grammatical pattern. So it's interesting to see how you get this kind of transfer.
That's real fascinating. Interesting. And I gotta confess, this is something I know nothing about. I can barely speak English. That's my only language. So it's like,
but you speak it effortlessly. While a ChatGPT needs a lot of inferences to speak English.
Right.
And a lot of water, a lot of energy.
But it does provide convincing looking answers, at least in English. I'm not sure about other languages. I've read that ChatGPT and similar models skew heavily towards English, but again, since it's the only language I speak, I'm like, well, I don't know, but it reads very, very well for what it does. When I chat with it, I mean, the words look convincing. The facts are a completely different topic, but it's not trained to do that, so it's not the point. But yeah, I mean, it reads really well. So.
It reads well, very well.
Yeah. But onto the stuff you're working on now. I mean, you switched out of academia and now working more in the regulatory space. And when we were chatting in Paris, I was utterly fascinated by some of the stuff that you were we're talking about. I mean, can you maybe brief the audience on some of the stuff that's going on right now with the regulation?
Yeah, what's going on right now in the regulation is that I would describe this as regulatory gold rush. Like in the last months, everyone wants to regulate. I mean, not even firms, but now every country in the world wants to have a global governance of AI. China has just closed the suggestion period for the generative AI law.
Oh, wow.
And you have already one case of a person that was arrested for deepfake because the deepfake law, the deep synthesis law in China entered into, was in March, started in March. And so we are really in a period that is just incredible from the regulatory point of view. Just there is really a rule rush, maybe not a regulatory gold rush, but a rule rush. And what is happening, at least in Europe, it's so next week there is the plenary vote in the parliament for the EUI Act. Which is the most comprehensive kind of risk management approach on the application of AI. So it's the broadest, right? You have a very horizontal way of approaching things, and we say, okay, there is risk, and we're going to try to manage the risk, and we're going to impose according to the risk of the application a different set of constraints. And definitely ChatGPT arrived in this setting and just made things more complex because there was this approach that technology was not going to be regulated. So we weren't going to address one particular type of algorithm and say, this algorithm is going to do this. But somehow you had to insert in the text different constraints. And definitely the approach for the moment of the parliament was to add constraints for what was this called in the regulation foundation models. That is the ChatGPT structure, because you can adapt it to many different tasks. So it was the Stanford definition that was taken, and definitely it ended in adding constraint on a certain type of algorithms. So you see this this approach of managing the risk in the end ended up in being more specific because of the arrival of ChatGPT. And it's interesting because in Europe you have a second approach that is much more based on values, that is embodied by the Council of Europe, that is 46 countries. And definitely this approach is much more based on human rights, on democracy, on rule of law. And the idea is to uphold human rights in these 46 countries. So it's going to be an international treaty. So, and the idea is really to focus on the principles. And so you have these two approaches, one that is really very technical, and the other one that wants to preserve and have guardrails on what makes the core value of these 46 countries. That is actually a lot of people. It's 700 million citizens. And so, yeah, it's a lot. And so the timeline has been delayed because of the process on the European that was started by the European Commission. So it's a bit delayed. But it's interesting also that other countries want to sign, like the US want to sign, Canada, you have Israel
Interesting.
joining, Japan. And so it's something really, I would say it's really strategic, because we saw it with the arrival of ChatGPT that even in the AI Act, certain amendments decided to reintegrate the idea of having fundamental rights, fundamental freedoms, freedom of expression as a requirement. So you see that although the AI Act was starting to be a very risk approach, gradually the idea of defending values is entering in the text. And when you think about the Chinese approach, that is really much more based on algorithm. The first law was on algorithmic. It was called algorithmic suggestion, and the idea was basically to say, okay, we have a recommendation. We have algorithm that do recommendations. Be there for the delivery boy, like workload. Be there for prices, or for news on social networks. We want to have a law that is going to say this kind of algorithm should behave this way. And for generative AI, it's happening kind of the same thing in China. They want socialist values to be the core of the answers of Chinese ChatGPT systems. So it's interesting to see how we are assisting, well, we are observing like that everyone is moving forward because they understand that when you have a talking machine, you definitely need this machine to be sure that she's going to talk your values, not only your language, but this machine should talk your values. And that's also the approach of the Group of Seven. Since the end of April, they decided to converge on a global governance, always about this idea of defending democratic values, right? Sorry, I did a very long answer.
No, it's fascinating. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, I think in the US, what we hear about is the AI Act in the EU, and that's about it. I wasn't even aware of the Council of Europe, or the different approaches that, say, China is taking compared to Council of Europe, EU, whatever the US is doing independently, and so forth. So it's fascinating.
But definitely the EU is not so independently moving. One of the big priority for the Biden administration is to move on an international level for this. And yesterday or the day before yesterday, I'm lost with time jet lag. So I think it was the day before yesterday. You had the Prime Minister of UK that met Biden on this topic, and they want to work on a global scale in order to find out what's the best way to find agreement and to foster something that could be respected and acknowledged both by industries and countries. And actually, Europe realized that the AI Act won't be there until 2 years, probably 3 years. And now different commissioners are moving in order to have like a code of conduct or kind of pact with industry world, so that the values and the general requirements of the AI Act will be already put into practice before it happens, and in order to be able to have an impact right now, because it takes time. You need all the standard bodies to start writing standards according to what will be voted, hopefully by the end of the year, in 6 months. So that's what I call the rule rush, because although Europe has a very strong approach, legal approach to the regulatory approach, you still have the problem of having this 3 years gap where you need people to converge on voluntary code of conduct.
How much influence does industry have on this? I know that like Sam Altman from OpenAI was doing his tour across Europe a couple weeks ago. Some of my friends were showing off pictures of them hanging out drinking a beer with Sam Altman. It's like, interesting timing, given that this is going to be closing out pretty soon in June. So.
Yeah, that's true. It was a very good timing, and definitely it was a world tour. I mean, he had several stops in Europe. He went to Spain. Spain is also a good move because Spain actually will be the president of in Europe, the next president in Europe. So a lot of deals will happen under the Spanish presidency. And also because there was a big center that was open, like a technology center for algorithmic transparency that was open in Sevilla.
Interesting.
I would say 1 month ago, or maybe 2. And the idea of this center is to get experts that can really help implement rule books like the Digital Service Act, so that they can really, like, technologically have the level of looking and digging into concrete cases. So Spain was a good move, I think, for Sam Altman. And he went to France, to Poland, to Germany. He went to Abu Dhabi, I think, last week. I mean, it was really a world tour. I think he went to South America too. In the EU, he was. People say that he was looking for an EU office for headquarter, because similarly to GDPR, the AI Act will require companies that have European-based users to have an headquarter. And the choice is really strategic because so it will be a national authority it will be the national authority where you have your headquarter that is gonna like oversight your work. So it's an important choice. And yeah, so I think that was, of course, it's a lot of talking and explaining. I think this part of explanation is really important. That's partly why I went out of research, because I really realized people wanted to understand how it works, what it is, and so I think it's important that tech company do this work of explaining. Google came out with courses about NLP. I think at the beginning of last week. So I think there is a lot of. I mean, Biden really asked about product safety. And people are waiting for this. So, but then of course there was a lot of discussing. I mean, it's people that say that global governance is not a good idea. Usually say it's because it's concentrating the power in one spot. It means that lobbying will be easier. And when you say lobbying, of course, big tech companies have better strategy, more money for doing this, but still, I mean, there isn't a perfect solution, right? So my impression for the moment, but I'm really changing my mind sometimes, is that AI is something that happens at scale. You know, you need a lot of data, and it's something that happens at scale. So if you want governance, that's definitely at scale that you have to be. not only for power, social power situations or industry situations, but still that's exactly what AI is, a system that works at scale. So it seems to me that it's an intrinsic situation that you can really avoid to have also something that is governing at scale.
You said something interesting that you changed your mind. Are things happening so fast that you're seeing things popping up that might be challenging your thinking often, or what?
It might be that I inherited this from my long journey in research. That for me, solving a problem is changing my mind several times a day according to data.
Yep.
And I really think that this kind of experimental approach is really the key in order to decide about this about this equilibrium, this need of balance between finding the right limits so that everything is going to develop in a good direction, but still develop, because this is game changing in so many aspects of our lives that it would be like a pity just doing the wrong move on the regulatory side. So for me, this idea that you have something that is incremental, but it's really moving fast right now. So that's why also I happen to change my mind.
Yeah.
I think it's very nice of the US approach that what is now happening is something that is more linked to creating a consensus on certain pillars. Like, for example, I found it interesting that the White House with the NSF is supporting a big hack this summer at the DEF CON, where you'll have the language models of OpenAI, Microsoft, even open source language models that are on the Hugging Face platform. Anthropic, NVIDIA will be invited to present their models and to be hacked, like by more than probably 1,000 people or under 1,000 people, but anyway, several hundred acres. So it seems to me that this very pragmatic and experimental approach is also interesting, and it's going to help everyone at the global scale to understand what are the limits in a very quantified and experimental way. So the project is led by Raman Chaudhary, that is the former AI ethicist at Twitter. I don't know if she would like me to call her this way, but skip it short. But and it's interesting because the idea is to have reports and to give feedback to firms. And for firms, what is important is also reputation, right? So I think there's a lot going on. By the end of August, it will be like third week of August in Las Vegas. And it will be interesting to see what comes out from this just massive red teaming. So just to clarify my point, why do I change my mind? Because I see things in an experimental way, like empirism seems to me a good way to go. And values too. I mean, how can you really protect certain values? And why do I think empirism is part of the game? Because definitely there is something about, you cannot govern something that you don't understand, that you don't have data on, right? When you speak about job disruption and everything, you need to have data in order to understand what will be disrupted, what's going to be the impact, even on the cognitive system of people that are going to have massive automation of certain cognitive tasks they usually do, like summarizing is a big training for your brain. And definitely summarizing, I mean, ChatGPT is very good at this, and other models that are smaller are also good at it. So you always need this kind of empirical grasp of thing in order to be sure that if you know what are your values, you're sure you find a technical way in order to embed them in the system, or just have guardrails in order that no harm is done to people. That's why I changed my mind. I like empirism.
No, and I think it's a good quality to have in light of, I would say, especially how quickly things are changing. It would be more concerning if you're like, yeah, I stubbornly am going to just stick to this point no matter what, because it is an interesting. The values is an interesting thing, right? Coming up with a comprehensive set of values that I don't know, what was it, 46 countries or maybe the G7 agree upon, right? Like that's, I can't imagine that's easy. I mean, when I go across America, just different states have different values, but what are the core things that we believe as as a country in the U.S., or what are the core things that the EU believes, and then trying to get all those on the same page. Especially in light of technology too. Like I feel like we're with these large language models and generative AI, especially. I think we're just now beginning to understand the implications of and the potential of these things. It's and widespread adoption of ChatGPT. I mean, that's only been out since late last fall. It's pretty new. So,
I may say, like, for example, a very precise question is how much ChatGPT can make your mind change on a topic.
Interesting.
And there was this nice study that I'll try to summarize as briefly as I can from colleagues in Cornell that decided to create two groups of people, one with a ChatGPT trained on text that has a certain position, and another one on a topic, and another one that has the opposite position. And they tried to measure how much people would change their mind before they had to write a text about a topic, before writing, during writing, and after having written the text. And you can definitely see that there's a bias, that people do change their mind according to the answers of ChatGPT. And the answers of ChatGPT, although they are kind of balanced, I mean, you have experienced the kind of on the other side, although they are balanced, they still have this fact that when the majority of the information in the training is given, is hinting in a certain direction, you definitely end up in following that direction. So this is kind of very interesting work that seems to me that is really important. And it's an empirical question, right? And it's definitely what we want to know about ChatGPT and the question of values that you're asking. And many different, you see, there are many parameters that you can change in this kind of study. Methodology is important, but the more this kind of studies come out, the more we'll be able to address technically what you can do in order to. And it's not just a disclaimer, like for the New York lawyer, it's not like a banner with a disclaimer that is gonna do the thing.
That's really interesting. What are some other ways that values are looked at right now with respect to AI?
I would say intellectual property is a big thing, especially in the US, and that's definitely one of the important aspect that the group of 7 is taking into account. And this is definitely something that is important for the Western approach. Japan had a ruling 2 weeks ago about intellectual property and training data, saying that training data were not really infringing intellectual property. I mean, it's much more complex in the way it's formulated, but just that's the kind of gist. So definitely something like intellectual property is something like, especially for, it started with images, and you have actions of get images that are still ongoing in the US. It started with images, but then it came out also with text generation too. What kind of, and then there's also the question of, how much you can influence democracy with text, automatic text generation, with all the memory about what happened with Cambridge Analytics, and definitely the question of intellectual property is really important. And there's a lot of debate exactly on this point for next week at the European level, because it's a complex thing to warrant for intellectual property in the training data. And one of the requirements that was added after ChatGPT is that the copyright material, that you have a transparency requirement on the copyright material, and you have to disclose it when you develop a generative AI system. And so this is I'm curious to see what will be happening on this. Because this is definitely something about that Sam Altman has been very vocal about in his European tour. So,
what has he been saying about it? What's his position?
His position is it's technically difficult. But the question of disclosing, when we know, like with the kernel study, how much it's important what is in the training data, with my example of the escort girl too.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's, I don't have, I mean, it of course it will be difficult, but that's definitely something that seems to be something that is like important in the US too. And one has also to remember that for Cambridge Analytics, the Federal Trade Commission ordered an algorithmic destruction. So that Cambridge Analytics had to destroy the data, but also destroy the algorithm, because it had been trained on data that weren't supposed to be used. And that's the same for Weight Watchers. More recently, like in 2002, they had an app and they had data from kids. It seems to me the kids were like it's 8 years, 8 years old kids, and they had also an algorithmic destruction for this. So it's not as if this kind of, I mean, several things are already there in the rules. So it's like the Italian data protection authority stopping the service for 20 days. There is already like law, like GDPR in Europe, that address this kind of things. Then the question, how do you interpret this? And but data are really important. I mean, even for example, from a more strategic point of view, there has been a task force on AI in the US that they published a report in January on how to to like as national strategy, let's say, on AI, and they suggested to create at the federal level to create data corpora, and that's a very interesting way of seeing things, because it means that you understand the importance of data, and you want to be an actor in the data possession or just in the data governance that is behind AI. So I would say that data is still important, although the architecture makes makes the difference on some aspects, but data is still important. Yeah.
Turns out. I don't know. Like you say, it's definitely a moment in history right now that we're all sort of moving forward through in real time. So this is and especially right now, like this week and next week, it's these are historic moments. So I don't know what happens next. I think you have probably a better idea, but yeah.
It seems to me that that it's a nice situation in which, I mean, a lot of tensions, a lot of lobbying, a lot of also politicians that want to get the light. You have many things that makes us human, right? But you also have this very energizing moment in which people want to look at the future and be sure that the future is kind of interesting and it's kind of sustainable. So what I really like also in the European approach is that they want to, you have to have a log of your carbon footprint in the AI Act. So it seems to me really interesting to see how we want to think about the future. You see how we want to secure the future in the present, right? Because usually you say, oh, the future is the future, it's going to happen and it's fine. But everyone is understanding that if you want the future to be sustainable, you definitely have to act now, because this it's a tool that is disruptive, right? Like, forget about the narratives of general artificial intelligence and all this, just about things like values, sustainability, mass control, massive fake news. You even have compositional fake news now. So you have a fake news, then you arrange a moment where you arrange a real event to reinforce the fake news, and then you continue on your fake news thread. I mean, we're really in a situation where these things become technically possible and at scale, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So last Friday, I was speaking at my son's sixth grade class about AI. They were very interested in it, the entire class, and I volunteered to go talk to them for an hour. And it was fun. It was also slightly depressing, I'm going to say, because normally, say when we were growing up, your parents would tell you about the future, and you'd have an idea that, I mean, it's probably going to look something similar to what we have, back in the day. And fast forward to today, and I had to be very frank with the kids. I said, I don't know what happens when you're my age, or even in your 20s, right? Things are changing so quickly. And I think to your point, even without artificial general intelligence, the things I told him is, look, you still got to find work has a lower chance of being automated, right? So a lot of the jobs that, I ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, well, okay, so that job might be automated. The other ones, may not be. And getting them thinking about that along those lines, right? And also to your point about the fake news, it's like, if you, I just kind of warned them, like, maybe do your best to stay off of social media, for example, and don't, and really learn how to discern what's fact and fiction, which I think is going to increasingly become a lot harder. So those are the things I, when I left the class, I was like, I'm glad we had the talk. I was also just a bit sad the rest of the day. So, because it's, and then so I'm glad these discussions are happening. I'm glad that, these discussions of rights and values, which I wasn't aware that these were happening. And I think that's great because this is fundamental. If we're only focused on the algorithms, like the Chinese approach, it's I think a very short-sighted way of approaching this. So
yeah, and for the future, I would say that there's definitely something about being able to concentrate for a long time span will be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Because so email speeded up life, right? The fact that you could have a written exchange in minutes with a person on the other side of the earth speeded up stuff so much. I mean, I remember my grandfather sending like a transcript in a fax, when I was a kid, and it made a little noise, right? And he had to write on paper or to do it on his. He ended up in having a computer, but he was just typing something. Yeah, it was a typewriter, and it was a lot of sound and everything. And I remember I have this memory as a kid, and so it took time, right, to interact. Now it's like not minutes, it's seconds, and we all have Slacks in order to exchange with colleagues or this kind of thing. So I think if you have automation on writing and writing text, it will be even faster. So there is something about attentional economy that is at the core of raising up children from if you think that in cognitive terms, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say just have a good attention span is really something important.
But it'll have interesting consequences for critical thinking too, and just the types of thoughts and innovations that we have too. I'm curious about the kinds of books that'll be coming out in the future, for example. Yeah. If those are even a thing, right? Yeah. So there's a study I was recently hearing about. Like, somebody did a study of human attention span, and in 2014, and don't quote me on these, but I think it was like 2 minutes or something like that. And now, as of last year or something, it's like 75 seconds. It's like the average that we can spend before we get distracted, which is pretty bad. So.
Yeah, so that's everything that's the whole rationale behind stopping TikTok in young children. In France, we have this move towards protecting the Ministry of Digital Affairs is really moving on in order to protect children from digital harm. That is, broadly speaking, of course, it's much more, there are bigger problems than just attention span, right? Yeah. But that's definitely something that is the difference between the TikTok algorithm in China and the TikTok algorithm outside China is about this attentional span. And how long it lasts, what's the refresh time. So there's definitely something with attention that I would say that is important. And the other thing is that we're starting to see a real synergy between neuroimaging and AI. And the more we go on, the more we see that the tools like GANs with images are very good at decoding, and you can reconstruct images while decoding neuroimaging data. There was this study that was out last month from Alex Uth that is currently running a group. They had this very nice Nature Neuroscience paper where they have a GPT-1, right? The very old version that was trained on functional magnetic images, and that was able to predict from the functional magnetic images, was able to predict part of the sentences that people were were listening. It was like
Oh, wow.
podcasts and nice stories, 40 stories. So a little corpus actually, and they were able to predict what was from the brain images with just a GPT-1. So
Wow.
it's really like
Whoa.
when you see, and then there was this Japanese paper that they used stable diffusion to decode images. Okay, they had like an enormous fMRI. They had the 7 Tesla fMRI, which gives you like a better granularity on your images. But these are like 3 good neuroimaging studies, all in Nature and similar papers, that show that there is really a synergy between the advancement of generative AI and brain decoding that is happening. And it's interesting also that researchers really have, from my point of view, they really have a nice ethic, because they really write in the scientific paper about mental privacy, about warning, about possible developments of brain decoding. And it's interesting to see that you really have researchers that engage in the possible impact with society.
That is the craziest stuff I've heard. I'm actually Googling this right now. I'm going to go.
Yeah, I can send you. Yeah. I can send you the links at the papers.
Yeah,
and
please do. Yeah.
Yeah, Alex Wood, I met him at conferences, like when I was younger. Oh, I shouldn't say this. Anyway.
That's fascinating. Cool. I know we're coming up on time. I appreciate you joining the show, and love our conversation. Frankly, this is an area that I don't know a lot about, and so it's good to chat about this. So it's hugely important. I would say this is some of the most important stuff that's being worked on in the world right now. So undoubtedly. So thank you.
No, you're welcome.
You're welcome. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
LinkedIn. It's a good way. You look for Murielle Popa-Fabre, and that's said in French, Murielle Popa-Fabre. And I'm the only one with such a name. So
yeah, you are.
Yeah, and I maybe I might not answer the very day in which you write me, but I'm surely gonna answer anyway.
Awesome. Cool. Well, great chatting with you, and maybe I'll see you again when I'm in Europe. So.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Have a nice day. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.